is thunder. It's a greater majority, then, said Helen, pouring herself another glass of sweet juice. The cardinal crumpled the paper up into a ball and absently threw it to the little monkey perched on the railing. The creature caught the ball, hooted happily, and threw it back at Cosati. The older man laughed the whole time they were playing. "I said it's a greater majority, then," repeated Helen a little more stridently. Cosati frowned, caught the ball of paper, and threw it with all his might out into the trees. The tiny primate chased after it, chattering happily. "Of course it is," he said, pouring himself a glass of his own. "There was never any doubt. The High House of Prosperity expressing an opinion about slavery, about the blasphemous heretics of Asavea and their damned abominable god of chains. It was never going to go any other way. I've already sent Ixial with the Liao so we can get started immediately." "What about the other houses?" "What about them?" snorted Cosati. Then he took another sip of juice and said in a more mellow tone, "The High House of Loyalty hasn't raised it, and I didn't expect them to. I think it will receive a greater majority in all the others, even Vigilance. The only real stumbling block there is the whole ask our allies to assist business, and I'm with the House of the People on this. We don't have the ships, but we can't let this go. A chance to wreck the Asavean slave trade, burn their grand temple of chains and cages. This kind of opportunity comes along once in a generation, and we cannot let it slip through our fingers. What did Ka the Preserver say?" Helen had heard parts of this already. Cosati was quoting his speech from the other day. She wondered if he realized. "They said, 'Most accursed be those who chain their fellows and rob them of virtue, as well you know, Cardinal,'" said Helen. "Although I think in this I'm more inspired by what Zemrus of the Isle said in a similar situation." "Oh? What do you mean?" "The best way to deal with slavers is to cut off their heads, and then cut off the heads of everyone who gave them money, and then burn all their ships to the waterline. I understand it is even more savage in the original Imperial." "Not quite as pithy, but very honest, I think," Cosati chuckled. Helen clinked her glass with his as they shared a toast to the beloved paragon of prosperity. "Right now, though," he said, a little more soberly, "I'm thinking of what Ordana the Shaper said, about the best way to bring down a tyrant being to forge weapons and put them in the hands of those they have oppressed." "One step at a time," said Helen, finishing her drink. "One step at a time." Overview. The Sumar House of the People plans to attack the center of the Asavean slave trade. They have invited the Empire and the Commonwealth to take part in the raid. Before Imperial citizens can participate, the Imperial Senate would need to legalize the action or declare war on Asavea. The Sumar House of the People plans to strike at the Asavean port city of Chaloncio. This is no random target. Chaloncio is built on the back of the slave trade. Almost every foreign slave brought into Asavea passes through this wretched place. Their ambition is to free as many slaves, kill as many slavers, and sink as many slave ships as possible before the Nemorian navy realizes what is happening. The Sumar know they cannot match the Asaveans at sea. Their plan hinges on a surprise attack made with overwhelming force to smash the city and then get back to the safety of Sumar waters. It also hinges on receiving support from their allies. After careful diplomatic negotiations between the High House of Prosperity and the ambassador to the Sumar Republic, the House of the People has extended an invitation to the Empire to support the attack. Chaloncio. Chaloncio is the primary slaving port in the Asavean archipelago. The majority of all slaves brought into Asavea from nearby nations come through Chaloncio. The city of Chaloncio all but covers the island that shares its name, the largest in the satrapy of Chantioleth in the southern Asavean archipelago. It is divided into half a dozen districts, at the heart of which stands a temple devoted to one of the many Chantioleti deities. Near the docks there is a temple dedicated to the Regente del Mar Eterno, with statues depicting sleek, half-fish, half-human creatures flanking the entrances. There is also a shipyard, where the shipwrights, all priests, extol the greatness of Viajera as they work on warships for the Asavean plenum. The largest district is the Distrito de Cadena, the chain district. Each of the markets here are dedicated to the slave trade. Thousands of captives pass through the expansive structures of marble and white granite each season, bound for smaller markets across the Asavean archipelago and beyond. The Distrito de Cadena presents an unruly sprawl across a third of the island's coastline, with extensive docks dedicated to the sole purpose of loading and unloading live cargo. The chain district is dominated by the Grand Temple de la Maître de la Cage d'Or, the largest structure in the city, dominating the skyline and visible from almost everywhere on the island. This temple is one of the reasons the Sumar wish to strike against Chaloncio now. Following the recent meetings of the so-called slaving nations, the majority of the priesthood of the God of Chains is apparently gathering in the city to discuss how best to address the threat of the Liberty Pact. There is a rare opportunity to decapitate the priesthood in one fell swoop, with the potential to do even more damage to the Asavean slave economy. The city as a whole is ruled from the Sapphire Keep by Patricio Sebastian Cerulio. The Cerulio are an old plenum family whose domination of the Asavean slave trade gives them almost bottomless coffers and immense political sway. Ever since Lord Sebastian's grandmother, Matricia Valentina, took control of the failing satrapy and turned it into the center of the foreign slave trade in Asavea, the family has gone from strength to strength. Now, Patricio Sebastian rules with an iron fist over a city that, in size at least, approaches the kind of splendor rarely found outside of the League. The Sumar plan to attack the city from several directions, with their ultimate aim being to destroy the Distrito de Cadena, destroy the Grand Temple of the God of Chains, and if possible, burn the docks of the Chain District on their way out. To pull off this ambitious undertaking, they need more ships and as much military assistance as they can get. As fellow members of the Liberty Pact, the Commonwealth has, by all accounts, already pledged their support, but cautioned that they will be able to provide only a limited number of ships, due to the threat of imminent war with the principalities of Jam. The Sumar believe the Empire's fleet captains can tip the balance of success decisively in favor of the virtuous. They also point to the inspiration of Zemres. It seems Sumar's support for this plan has been strengthened by those who have visited the Zemres seminary in Madruga. Indeed, it is the former pirates of the Freyr who will lead the way when the Sumar attack Chaloncio, and they would welcome the opportunity to fight alongside those imperial citizens who follow the path that the Blade of the Isles laid out. Together, Empire, Republic, and Commonwealth could strike a decisive blow against the slave trade in the West. It would also prove how seriously the Liberty Pact takes their commitment to ending the horror of slavery. Unfortunately, it is not quite that simple. Questions of legality. The Asavean archipelago is recognized as a foreign power. The Senate has set a precedent with a previous judgment. The Asavean people are defined as foreigners by the Imperial Senate. It is thus illegal for an imperial citizen to attack them, and the civil service observers on each fleet would mean that any captain who assaulted an Asavean ship would face criminal charges. However, this would not be the first time that imperial citizens have fought against and killed numbers of Asavean citizens although the circumstances are now quite different. In summer 382 YE, the Senate passed a motion to make it legal for imperial mercenaries to fight in Asavea without legal repercussions, on the understanding that they likewise would receive no protection under imperial law for any reprisals against them. This allowed imperial military captains to participate on either side of the Asavean civil war. Should the Senate countenance this attack against the slave markets of Silencio, they could pass a similarly worded motion, making it clear to the magistrates that it is not a crime for imperial fleet captains or military units to work with the Sumar. As long as they specify that this is specifically for the attack against Silencio, it would not open the door to piracy. Alternatively, the Senate could declare war on the Asaveans. This would resolve all concerns about illegality around this raid, or any future joint effort between the Sumar Republic and the Empire aimed at disrupting the Asavean slave trade. If the Senate chooses to do neither, it will not be possible for Imperial fleet captains or military units to become involved, and the raid will likely be unsuccessful. Questions of consequence. If the Empire supports the raid on Silencio, the Asavean plenum would be absolutely livid. Relations with the Asavean archipelago are, at best, extremely strained. The anti-imperial voices in the plenum, their equivalent of the Senate, are much louder than those that support ties with the Empire. Since the alleged meeting of the anti-Liberty Pact nations in Nemoria following the winter solstice, rumors of which began circulating in earnest last season, the number of Asavean ships trading along the Bay of Catazar has been at an all-time low, perhaps a consequence of the sanctions each nation has applied against the other. The Cavabianche docks in Caricomare remain open, but it is now a question of when, not if, the Heraclian and Ragnab families who supply the docks cave into pressure from their peers and close their operation. If Imperial forces take part in the raid against Silencio, it will be the final nail in the coffin of Asavean Imperial relations. If more than a handful of Imperials are involved, then there is no question that the plenum will close their ports. Indeed, it is likely they would declare the Empire to be an enemy of the Asavean people, putting the two nations on a war footing. Still, for all their naval might, the Asavean navies are in no position to launch attacks against the Empire directly. The bigger risk is that they offer mercenary assistance to one of the nations the Empire were at war with, but the scale of that aid would be limited by the distances involved and the corruption and inefficiency of the Asavean state. As a minimum, the Empire could expect trade with the Sumar to suffer as Asavean navies dominate the waters that lie between them. If the Empire does take part in the raid, however, and it is a success, then it will further signal Imperial commitment to ending the slave trade. It will garner considerable diplomatic capital with the Sumar, and a smaller but still notable amount of capital with the Commonwealth. It would also signal to the rest of the known world that the Liberty Pact and the Empire alike are prepared to take direct action in pursuit of their goal. The attack. The attack on Silencio will only be available if the Imperial Senate supports it. Both fleets and military units can participate. Enchantments that make a fleet more effective at privateering, or military units effective at paid work, will be beneficial. Sumar ships will transport all freed slaves back to the Sumar Republic. If the Senate removes the obstacles to taking part in the raid on Silencio, Imperial fleets and military units will be able to take part in the attack. The Sumar welcome both ships that can help move their own troops and warriors prepared to strike against the Asavean slave trade. For fleets, there will be an additional option accessible through the Independent Action drop-down menu: Break the Slave Trade. Any number of fleets can take part in the action, and enchantments that affect privateering, such as Blood and Salt, will provide additional strength to the opportunity. For military units, the additional option is accessible through the Independent Action drop-down menu, and enchantments that improve paid work, such as Merciless Wrath of the Reaver, will provide the additional strength. Targets. While there are extensive Sumar forces present, as well as Commonwealth vessels, the total strength of fleets and military units contributed by the Empire will ultimately determine the outcome of the raid. Up to 5,000. Chasing ships. The raid does not have enough strength to penetrate Asavean waters or threaten Silencio. Instead, the fleets will focus on capturing merchant ships and sinking slavers outside Asavean territorial waters. Participating imperial fleets and military units will still get paid, but while the slave trade will be disrupted, it will have no long-term effects. On the other hand, the Asavean plenum will place the entire blame for this disruption at the door of the Sumar and a few overzealous imperial pirates, their brains no doubt poisoned by too much liao, which means there will be no significant diplomatic repercussions for the Empire. The Asaveans will also underestimate the Liberty Pact commitment to ending the slave trade, meaning there may be other opportunities in the future for operations in the Sea of Salt. 5,000 to 10,000, sinking slavers. The Liberty Pact forces penetrate Asavean waters and reach Silencio. The city defences, however, will ultimately prove to be too strong for the attack to do much more than capture or sink ships trading with the port. A few hundred slaves will be liberated by the Sumar, and the Asavean slave trade will suffer some disruption. Unfortunately, the Asaveans will take the threat of the Liberty Pact much more seriously. The plenum will significantly increase the number of warships guarding ships involved with the slave trade, and the defences of Silencio will be bolstered, meaning future opportunities to try and deal with slaving in the western waters of the known world will be that much more difficult. 10,000 to 15,000. Destroy the slave markets. There is enough power to push through the defences of Silencio and into the Distrito de Cadena. The slave markets will be destroyed, and several thousand people destined for life in chains will be freed and taken back to the Sumar Republic. The raid would be counted a success. It will be at least a year before the Asaveans are able to repair the damage done to the chain district. It will send an inarguable message that the Liberty Pact alliance is prepared to take direct action to end the scourge of slavery. Furthermore, there will be the opportunity for gathering some of the ill-gotten wealth of Silencio. Every fleet and military unit participating will gain an additional 2 crowns and 2 ingots or measures of random materials, in addition to the money provided by the Sumar House of the People. The Asaveans will certainly seek reprisals against the Sumar, and the diplomatic relations with the Empire and the Commonwealth will deteriorate significantly. They will also take greater pains to protect both their slaving operations and their territorial waters. 15,000 to 25,000. Decapitate the priests of chains. The raid will devastate the Distrito de Cadena as above. In addition, the Grand Temple de la Maître de la Cage d'Or will be sacked by the Alliance. In a stroke, the leadership of the God of Chains priesthood will be wiped out. The Asavean slave trade will take several years to recover, and doing so will require a great deal of money and attention from the plenum. They will absolutely seek reprisals against the Sumar and their allies. The Sumar Republic will dub the raid a great success. Taking out the priests of the chained god is a victory for virtuous people everywhere, and will be seen by many imperial citizens as suitable recompense for the Asavean destruction of the Temple of the Way in the Moria. In addition, every fleet or military unit that took part in the raid will be able to claim some of the wealth of the temple, receiving 4 random herbs on top of what they have claimed from the chain district. Finally, there is also an opportunity to uncover information on the Noble Lady of the Sea. The Noble Lady is the rumoured head of a large, clandestine slaving fleet that preys on small, undefended nations and raids their coastlines for slaves. The Noble Lady of the Sea's scarlet-sailed ships are known to ply their trade in the Asavean archipelago, the principalities of Jam, and even Duvtreg. The exact location of their base of operations has never been discovered, but the priests of the God of Chains know where it lies. And if the temple is raided, that information will fall into the hands of the Liberty Pact. There will be sufficient information to create an opportunity to strike at her stronghold, presented before the autumn equinox 384 YE. More than 25,000. Burn the Sapphire Keep. The raid not only destroys the Distrito de Cadena and decapitates the faith of the God of Chains, but it is also able to hold the city long enough for an assault against the Sapphire Keep. Patricio Sebastian will be executed for his crimes against virtue, along with any of his family complicit in the slave trade. The castle itself will burn, and the column of smoke will be visible from Nemoria itself. On the way out of Chaloncio, the Alliance will also set fire to the port, inflicting catastrophic damage to the quays, the shipyards, and any slaving vessels that have so far avoided their attention. The slave trade in Asavea will be absolutely crippled for years to come, almost certainly forcing the plenum to respond. No other Asavean family will be prepared to support the slave trade in such an overt fashion for fear of a similar attack from the Liberty Pact. Other slaving nations in the known world, especially the principalities of Jarm, will be left in no doubt as to the fact that the Pact intends to wipe the practice out, and will take precautions of their own. Every fleet and military unit that took part in the attack will gain a portion of the wealth held in the Sapphire Keep, another 2 crowns, and 2 more ingots or measures. In addition, 10 wains of mithril will be distributed randomly between all the fleets and military units that took part. Rewards. The Sumar Plenum is providing some payment to those prepared to take part in the raid. If the attack is successful, there will be options to secure more of the wealth of Chaloncio. Between them, the Sumar House of the People and the High Houses of Prosperity and Ambition have managed to collect a significant budget together to pay for imperial citizens prepared to support their mission. Prosperity demands nothing less. A standard military unit or fleet will be paid 7 crowns by the Sumar, with upgraded or enchanted fleets receiving an additional crown for each additional rank. If the raid is successful, however, then there will be the potential for significant additional wealth. Treading in the path of Zemres means that those participating will be able to claim some of the wealth of Chaloncio for themselves, depending on how effective the attack is. Conquering the market and capturing the Sapphire Keep will both provide additional wealth to those taking part. Furthermore, the Quartermaster General could choose to supplement the payment further by assigning the guerdon to the action. Communication. Lady Madriania of the Blue Stones could be warned of the planned raid. The current ambassador to Asavea is Ashbourne Pact of the Imperial Orcs. The title of ambassador to Asavea is up for election at the upcoming summit. One mountebank has an alternative suggestion, which he believes could start to mend relations with the Asavean plenum. Lucas Castagnoli de Holberg suggests sending a missive to Lady Madriania of the Bluestones, warning the Asaveans of the intended raid. Unfortunately, the only person that Lady Madriania is likely to believe is the ambassador to Asavea. If they were to send such a warning, however, then the plenum would be able to move forces into Chaloncio to repel the raid. If Lady Madriania of the Bluestones were warned, and the Senate gave permission for the raid, then it would increase the minimum amount required of each stage by an additional 7,000 strength. For example, taking the Sapphire Keep would require at least 32,000 strength, and at least 17,000 strength to breach the Chain District. This is the worst-case scenario. The attack would be harder, but the Empire would gain little leverage with the Asaveans. If, on the other hand, she were warned and the Senate did not give permission, or less than 5,000 strength was gathered, then the situation would be very different. The plenum would be greatly in debt to the Empire, to the point where the anti-imperial faction would lose all credibility. The raid would be repelled, and the ability of the Sumar to wage war on the Assaveans ruined for at least the next 2 years. They are committing most of their maritime force to the attack, and would find the Assavean navies lying in wait for them. The loss of life would be catastrophic. The Sumar and Commonwealth would not automatically assume it was the Empire that had warned the Assaveans. There are any number of ways that news of an operation of this size might reach the ears of someone in the plenum able to take it seriously and lay a trap. But it would still damage the Sumar enthusiasm for the Liberty Pact. The House of the People would be much more cautious about involving allied nations in their plans in future. If it ever came out that the ambassador to Assavea had given such a warning to the plenum, it would not only tear the Liberty Pact apart, but it would end the current state of détente between the Sumar Republic and the Empire.